Heyo, hi, hello, I'm Hippie Rat, and Undertale may be one of, if not the most significant independent productions in recent history. With the impact this quaint role-playing video game has had in the hearts of players and the mind of the culture, there is certainly something to be said of the ability for an individual or two to create a piece of art that resonates so deeply with so many, and mankind's accomplishment in allowing us all to share these experiences so closely and so vividly, regardless of the space among us all. However, where most see a game that refines elements of several beloved influences into a masterpiece with a very personal story and a strong emotional core, my attention is drawn to something else. Something very specific that the game leans into that changes everything I know about storytelling in video games. And that very specific detail that turned this entire medium on its head is you. Mind you, this is not you in the same sense of the word as who I would like to thank for tuning into my 10,000 subscribers special, although I will go into detail on the true meaning of the word as it applies here in a moment. For now, I want to express my gratitude for those of you who have brought me to this milestone, this 5th order of magnitude. And if you're watching for the first time, feel free to subscribe now because this is not the only promise I've made for reaching a specific amount of subscribers. I would like to remind you that this is only one in the Tale trilogy. And when we hit 20,000 subscribers, I will do a video on Tattletale. And at 30,000, I will do a video on Telltale Games. And along with making sure that you hit that subscribe button, I would really appreciate it if you checked out my Patreon and considered supporting me there. With that, let's continue. One of the most important parts of storytelling is the distinction of the grammatical person as it relates to the narration. In general English communication, the grammatical person can be separated into the denotation of the first person, or the speaker, the second person, or the addressee, and the third person, or all other people being referred to. In narration, this concept is expanded to the narrative point of view. In written or spoken texts, those that do not have a necessary visual element, the point of view is easiest to identify by the use of pronouns in regular narration, and most pieces follow the same POV throughout the text. Narrative works, whether fictional or non-fictional, most commonly take the form of first or third person, where the narrative voice represents the direct thoughts of a character or author as they occur throughout a series of events, or make reference to the actions of those involved in a series of events from an outside perspective, respectively. A rule of thumb to follow is that if you mostly see instances of pronouns that refer to the self, I, me, we, us, outside of dialogue, it is a first-person narrative. And if you mostly see instances of pronouns that refer to others, he, she, they, outside of dialogue, it is a third-person narrative. Second-person narrative is the most rare, usually occurring in circumstances of novelty. Stories that set out to engage the reader in such a way go against the grain of the most natural storytelling structure, insisting the reader themselves to be involved with the events of the narrative, unless the quote-unquote you being referred to is denoted directly as being a specific person or character that is demonstrably separate from just anyone who may get their hands on the text. Imagine, if you will, a letter being sent from person A, let's call Alex, to person B, let's call Brittany. In the letter, Alex recalls an old memory shared between themselves and Brittany, who is responsible for the physical events of the memory. Alex lists these events in fantastic prose, all while utilizing pronouns that refer to the addressee as you, who in this case is the intended recipient of the letter, Brittany. Person C, Captain, is asked to proofread this letter. As Captain reads the letter, they witness a series of references to something that the letter insists were actions committed by Captain, since the nature of second-person narrative is to utilize the pronoun you, which Captain naturally reads as something referring to themselves. However, Captain reaches the intuitive, logical understanding that in this case, despite utilizing the word you, it does not actually refer to themselves, since they are not the intended recipient of the letter, of the story, of the narrative. Thus, not all second-person narratives do literally refer to the reader or audience as their addressee. Some that do usually do so, however, include instructions, say a recipe or a set of rules or procedures. Technically speaking, these are, in a sense, a narrative, and any individual step in a process can be preceded with the phrase, "you will," at which point you can plot out the entire story of the transformation of a couple slices of bread into a peanut butter and jelly sandwich from the point of view of you, the person making that sandwich. Second-person narratives are also common in tabletop role-playing games, such as Dungeons & Dragons, where the games master takes the role of a narrator telling a story with verbal reference to the settings and circumstances that surround those denoted with the pronoun you. The players, who are themselves in character, participate by making choices that affect the story's progression, as well as initiating random chance dice rolls that determine their successes and failures. Keep that last example in mind. It might clue you into a major point we will address later. As narrative escapes the text and enters the realm of the visual, especially cinematic, identification of the point of view becomes somewhat more complex. In this case, first-person POV can be easily identified by the cinematic concept of POV shots, where the ethereal camera takes the role of a character's vision. For example, much of the cold open of the film Halloween is performed as a POV shot, essentially serving as a first-person narrative told from the perspective of a young Michael Myers. On rare occasions, films are told entirely in first person via these means, such as in Elia Scholler's Hardcore Henry or Gaspar Noé's Enter the Void. Of note also is the concept of found footage or documentary films, in which the camera is a diegetic element of the story. In these cases, the quote-unquote narrator is either whoever is in control of the camera, or even just the camera itself, fulfilling the requirements for first-person narrative. We now turn our attention to perhaps the most common narrative language in film, in which the camera is a non-diegetic element that serves as the source of perspective within a film. Incidentally, this is likely where the most disagreement will occur, as certain film theorists have conflicting concepts for what the physical space occupied by a camera in a film in which the camera is non-diegetic represents. Some film theorists view the presence of the camera and the screen through which an audience views the film as a veil or a window, sort of a portal into the narrative, in which the audience is a passive observer, merely playing witness to the events of the story. Following this logic, I believe it's fair to consider this type of narrative third person, but other interpretations of the camera's presence and the screen's role have turned this into more of a gray area. You see, there is also the consideration of the quote-unquote camera as a sort of ghost, a character in and of itself that is unique to all forms of cinema and represents the audience itself as an intangible, invisible observer. Based on this idea, the camera is the addressee, and what we would have considered third-person cinema is actually second-person cinema. Arguments can be made either way. Everything that is shown on screen is perfectly crafted for the viewing audience, thus it is a narrative built around the addressee. Second person. On the other hand, one may find it more appropriate to consider it second person if the characters are aware of the audience's presence. Thus, second person may only happen in moments of monologue pointed toward the audience or in fourth wall breaking events, and all other general cases are reserved to being third person. As of now, I hesitate to resolve myself to a singular conclusion regarding this paradox. In fact, some theorists may consider it a futile endeavor to search for the perfect analog between the grammatical person as understood in textual language and the grammatical person as could be understood in the language of cinema. The utility in exercising such a thought experiment in the first place is simply to demonstrate the potential in applying the concept of the grammatical person, as it relates to narrative point of view, to non-text-based media, something I believe consists of reasonable logic and is an important prerequisite to the following considerations. The main difference between how the grammatical person could be referred to in a video game narrative, as opposed to how the grammatical person could be referred to in cinema, is that there is very much an established concept of what a first-person video game is, what a third-person video game is, etc. Generally speaking, point of view, as described in these terms, literally refers to the position of the digital camera in a video game with 3D graphics in which you manipulate a player character. In a first-person video game, you see the world through the character's eyes. This is especially common in shooters, where the point of the game is to aim your gun and shoot in just the way the character would. Although the genre does not exclusively utilize this perspective in every release, nor is it the only kind of game you'd witness this perspective in. Third-person video games usually place the digital camera somewhere above and behind the player character, although this positioning standard can vary. Oftentimes, a video game with more emphasis on the setting and element of the location, especially as it relates to the player character, utilizes a third-person display. Although again, these terms are not universal laws of game design. Some games even allow for variation in the point of view, either through preferential game settings, game mechanics that require the alternative point of view, or omniscient visual storytelling at certain points in the game. The common train of thought stemming from the understanding of first and third person video games tend to arrive at the same basic question. What, then, is a second person video game? After all, a first-person video game is defined by the digital camera's attachment to the player character's eyes, and a third-person video game is defined by the digital camera's attachment to anywhere else. That's a Boolean function. There is no midway point between eyes and not eyes. Some people may be quick to point out a claim that second-person perspective in this context could potentially refer to the rare occasion when the camera takes on the form of a different character's eyes while you are still controlling your player character, or perhaps a character that remains in a static position while your character navigates around, such as with cinematic modes. And perhaps this technically makes sense and serves to complete the trifecta, but you may also recognize that none of these really serve the same narrative purposes as the concept of a POV in the language of cinema. These digital camera positions serve as a vehicle through which the images on screen can be translated into responses from the player, rather than being strictly a means to tell the story. Instead, if we want to differentiate a grammatical person in video games, we need to separate it from the generally recognized concept of perspective in video games and break down the concept from an entirely new angle. Little did I know that this slight quandary I subconsciously considered for many years would be answered by an epiphany I was gifted by none other than Undertale. And I'll give you a hint. A few moments ago, I explained which of the three grammatical persons is most prominently utilized in tabletop role-playing games. and it is not insignificant that TTRPGs are also gaming experiences. Undertale is a 2D RPG video game released by Toby Fox in 2015. Save for the art design of Temi Chang and other miscellaneous contributions of friends, Fox was responsible for the whole game, story and all. Said story follows a human child falling into the underground, a realm inhabited by the monsters remaining in the aftermath of a brutal war against humans. Surprisingly, this child is not immediately faced with hostility and hardship, and instead the kindness and friendship of many of those they meet. During their adventure, they meet many dynamic and lovable characters while uncovering little pieces of lore regarding the first human child to have ever fallen into the underground, as well as the goat-like monster boy they befriended. However, the final stretch of the child's journey is determined by how exactly you played throughout the game. You see, much like most other RPGs, much of the actual gameplay comes down to individual combat stages. In this case, with various monsters throughout the underground, including many of the characters you've interacted with and have perhaps grown somewhat attached to throughout your experiences. Where this game differs from most other RPGs is that, in lieu of physical combat with these monsters, you can instead find other methods of vanquishing them in ways that do not destroy them. To that end, no enemy throughout the game has to die. And as such, the game highlights this premise by presenting 3 main endings depending on how you played the game. The neutral ending is the most common, since it requires killing any number of monsters without killing all of them. That includes killing just one monster, as well as killing all but one monster. This ending has lots of less significant variations to it, depending on which monsters were killed, as well as what side missions were completed, but all versions generally sum up to the player character waking up on the human side of the barrier. Completing a neutral ending allows for the player to then complete a true pacifist game, where not a single monster is killed and all major side quests are completed. In this case, the main antagonist, Flowey, tries to use the souls of 6 of the friends you've made throughout the game to complete a ritual to break down the barrier between the monster realm and the human realm. Flowey is eventually revealed to host the soul of Azrael Dreamer, the goat boy monster that had befriended the first fallen human. It is revealed in other endings that the first fallen human had passed away from an illness, and Azrael had fused their soul with him for some time, enough for the human to carry their own body across the barrier to bring to their home village. The villagers then killed Azrael, thinking he was responsible for the human's death. Azrael's soul then left his body and was revived as Flowey. If the player kills all monsters throughout their game, then they can complete the genocide ending. Here, the identity of the first fallen human is revealed to be named Kara, a child that is described as having been remarkably similar to the player character, who in other endings had been revealed to have been named Frisk. Certain implications throughout the endings, as well as further lore, suggest Kara's soul to have actually been revived as Frisk. And by giving into these homicidal urges, Frisk effectively gives way to Kara's presence. Of further significance is the meta aspects of the gameplay. Throughout Undertale, most game mechanics have some kind of in-universe construct that the mechanic represents in parallel. For example, 2 of the player's most prominent stats are XP and LV, the former of which increases with each monster killed, and the latter of which increases with enough increase in the former. It's eventually revealed by fan-favorite character Sans, in one of a handful of significant end-game fourth wall breaks, that these stats are not, in fact, simply short for experience points, and level, like in most video games. Instead, XP stands for execution points, putting emphasis on the cruelty the main character demonstrates with each kill, as well as the ironic humanity held by the so-called monsters in the underground. Operating under further layers of irony is the LV stat, which actually stands for love. Described as a way of measuring one's capacity to hurt, love is itself an acronym for level of violence. Immediately, we can note that, in part, the game wants to utilize its meta elements to comment specifically on just how violent the player character might be. As we continue on, I want you to start thinking about what, or rather, who exactly causes the player character to develop a level of violence, and we will elaborate on that in just a moment. Along with these stats, the save game feature in Undertale also has an in-universe explanation. Determination is a system of emotional energy that allows one's soul to persist after death. This explains how Kara and Asriel were able to revive themselves in new vessels, in Frisk and Flowey respectively, and it also explains how, in the case of death, the player character can continue on at every save point, each of which fills the character with determination upon activation. This system is also responsible for the reset function, which normally would erase all but a handful of variables in gameplay. That handful mostly consisting of nods to the meta, deja vu, and the player character's name as used by other characters until the name Frisk is revealed. A major exception is the completion of a genocide route, which notably involves the player character giving their soul to Kara in exchange for rebuilding the world they destroyed. No matter what, completing a genocide route irreparably changes the game, and your further demonstrations of kindness are tainted by the fact that your soul has been given to Kara. The question is, if Frisk's soul is the revived version of Kara's soul, then the soul that is being given to Kara belongs to whom? You. As mentioned, within Undertale, the reveals of the names Frisk and Kara, or at least their significance to the player character, do not come about until the end of the game, and only do so as a direct response to the player's actions. Elsewhere, all non-player characters refer to the player character by your name, or rather, whatever name was given upon initiating the game. Every time you save your game, the narration does not claim that Frisk is filled with determination. It says that you are filled with determination. The level of violence is not the subject of arbitration by some predetermined story being told to you. The level of violence is not determined by Toby Fox nor Frisk, but you. Since when were you the one in control? Well, as much as Kara takes back control in some sense, you were always the one in control. Despite everything, it's still you. That's just how video games work. The narrative is always your point of view and comprises nearly entirely of actions you take. Some other classic text-based games, like Oregon Trail, somewhat prophetically lean into this, borrowing the narrative format of tabletop role-playing games by referring to the player character with the pronoun you. Not every game does do this, but regardless of how the narrative addresses the player character, regardless of how much it hammers home to be their story, you, the player, hold all the cards and determine whether that story ends at the flagpole or down a pit. I mean, look at Legend of Zelda, a video game franchise with a timeline that splits at a given game's fail state, meaning that there are canonical timelines in which Link, the vessel through which the player becomes the hero, can fail in his journey due to the player's actions, a skill issue. And this is a perfectly reasonable outcome for such a story. And whether or not the games or the culture around them make a point of it, every video game narrative is like this. They are all dependent on you. So, we know what a first-person video game is. We know what a third-person video game is. But what is a second-person video game? All of them. Video games are seen as a form of escapism, a way to put your focus, your worries, your responsibilities in a whole other world, one that is free of far-reaching consequences, where you can do literally anything you want, conquer any challenge, accomplish the impossible. And as such, many people utilize the genre to let out frustrations. You can immerse yourself in a place where hurting someone can satiate your level of violence without causing any real harm. The difference is, Undertale is a game where no one has to endure fake harm either, and it's designed to provide consequences for giving into otherwise inconsequential violent tendencies. In Undertale, your escapist opportunity to hurt where no real person is hurt can be irreparably changed by going too far, hurting everyone and everything, and giving up your soul in the process. Your soul. No matter how much compassion resides within you and how much you take the opportunity to be nice where it doesn't really matter, if you once gave in to that curiosity that nabs at you, if you once gave in to the intrusive thoughts that no one would care to call you on, if you once gave in to the selfishness and malice that naturally inhabit our minds and are inhibited by reason and care, it would forever reflect upon you. You can try as you might to make up for it, still with little purpose in doing so, but it wouldn't do much. Despite everything, it's still, well, you know. I want to thank you all again for 10,000 subscribers, and I want to especially thank my friend Quentin Reviews for being one of the biggest forces in getting me to this milestone. Look at this. Look at this thing he made. Quentin made this for me. It's a cardboard play button. The official YouTube cardboard play button for 10,000 subscribers. Because, you know, for those of you who don't know, the silver play button is for 100,000 subscribers, gold at 1 million. You know, it keeps getting more and more sensational as they introduce more orders of magnitude. But this one, I mean, I still have to get it framed because the frame he gave me was broken. But you know, this one is definitely like, if/when I one day get like a more official play button from YouTube, this is definitely going to be like a much more prized possession of mine, just because it's so personal and fucking awesome. So, you know, thank you again, Quentin, for, you know, not only making this, but also being the reason that I could have gotten to 10,000 subscribers in the first place. You know, I really appreciate you. For those of you who don't know, my subscriber incentives have actually been inspired by his own subscriber incentives, especially his 400,000 subscriber special, the iCarly breakdown, which is still being worked on, nearly double the subscribers later. I want to make it clear, if it wasn't already, that when I laid out Undertale, Tattletale, and Telltale as subscriber goals, I never intended to create several hour-long videos going over literally every detail associated with these properties, like Quentin has been doing with iCarly and its sister shows. These were always intended to be video essays and reviews of reasonable length. I really hope it's understandable that I'm not here to do to Undertale what Roland Barthes did to Saracen. I'm not here to review merch, break down every character, celebrate the 5-year anniversary orchestral concert, nor even mention the sequel, Deltarune. You know, I'm just not that dedicated to Undertale for that. I figure that a job like that is better suited for more die-hard fans of Undertale, like the ones who just scroll down to the comments to tell me that Deltarune is technically not a sequel or something. So I hope that expectations have been reasonably managed for a relatively smaller subscriber milestone. But before I sign off, I do want to remind you that we are still well on our way to the 20,000 and 30,000 Tattletale and Telltale Games goals. And I have plenty of other exciting videos lined up for the future, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss those. As a teaser, this isn't the last time I'm gonna be talking about Undertale on this channel, nor even in any of the videos that I'm currently working on. I also want to ask you to consider supporting me on Patreon in order to help pay off the time I spend working on these videos, as well as the resources I purchase to make these videos as enjoyable as possible. I'm looking to revamp the Patreon page soon, so be on the lookout for that. Until then, I'm Hippie Rat. Love yourself, and good night.
Alright, come here. You can stand right here. So I got you. So this is the first time that Hippie and I have ever met in person. And this is a little early, but I got you a gift.
Oh boy.
Because I was going to get you this anyways, and then, so, you know, we might have to hold on to this for a few months, but we will accomplish this, okay? So, okay. So, in presumption of our accomplishing of this great goal, I want to gift you an official,
Oh my gosh.
10,000 subscriber
Oh my gosh.
YouTube plaque.
Yo! It's
Kind of broke on the plane, I guess.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Yes, it is a cardboard button, subscriber button, and it is already falling apart.
That's perfect. Oh my god, that is so amazing.
You get a little of a handyman secret weapon on there, it'll be fine.
Holy shit.
Just like a bit of duct tape at each border.
Yeah, I would fit the aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly.
God, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just figured we can upload this. We could record some stuff and then post it for your, right after you hit 10K.
Yeah, right as soon as I hit it, yeah.
Yeah, just have it come out and then delete it if you fall under. And then
just keep putting it back out.
when you reach it again.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
Yeah.